Thank you, Liam, you funny little alien, you. And thank you, listener, for tuning into the Oracles of James Tyson. It is I, James Tyson. On this episode, I introduce you to my Pacific Northwest buddy, Ron Morehead. He's an author and adventurist, producer of the Sierra Sounds, and has been known for decades for his worldwide research into Bigfoot Sasquatch phenomena, and has captured the vocalizations and the communications between, I was going to say big feats, Bigfoot, in what has been called the Sierra Sounds. He's an author of a number of books on his research into the Bigfoot and Sasquatch phenomena. Today, he comes closer than any other researcher to having a complete body of evidence that they do exist. And we come into this, and like anything I do in the paranormal, well, not anything, but when it comes to ghosts, I just automatically, I'm not going to try to convince you that there are ghosts, because there are, and I can't waste my time trying to explain that to you on all the experience I've had with them. The same for Ron and his experience with Bigfoot. Step into this. Bigfoot do exist. Now, we will continue, and we'll tell you a little bit about what he has found. Now, the Sierra Sounds are the only Bigfoot recordings that have been scientifically studied, time-tested, and accredited as genuine. Ron has documented his personal interactions with these big giants and produced his own story on a CD and also a book called Voices in the Wilderness. One of the books that I grabbed off him a few years back was The Quantum Bigfoot. And in this, Ron discusses the theories behind the interdimensional being, or what we believe, or he believes may be an interdimensional being, the Bigfoot, where it may explain why some people will see it go around a corner of a tree and disappear. Or in one of Ron's adventures, he went out tracking the thing and tracked it a ways, and all of a sudden the tracks disappeared. So where'd it go? Was it picked up by a Bigfoot helicopter? Who the heck knows? So how does quantum physics relate to spirituality and Bigfoot? Well, in his 45 years of researching this phenomenon, he's heard several very strange reports. A few of these reports from seemingly heartfelt people claim that the creatures just disappeared. Well, is that even possible? Can the laws of quantum physics actually answer the question? Well, knowing what he knows, he's compelled to delve in and see. And the actual mathematics of quantum physics says there is more going on than what we will see in our own three-dimensional eyes. So we're going to touch a bit about that. No, we're not going to get too carried away into physics, because frankly, I never got carried away into physics. So we're trying not to, we're not going to dumb it down, but we're not going to get heavily into the types of physics that we try to avoid in school. And if you didn't try to avoid physics in school, bless you. Bless your heart, because we need people who are actually way smarter than me and these kind of things. So we are going to talk about that. We are going to listen to the Sierra Sounds, the actual vocalizations that over time at his camp up in the Sierra Nevada mountains in Northern California, Ronald and his buddies captured over their trips up there and their interactions with these big hairy fellows that bounce around. We're also going to talk about some other we'll call it paranormal phenomena that happens at the camp and around that area, or we'll call it, maybe for now we'll call it coincidentally. So enjoy. Hello, Ron. How are you doing?
Great. James, how are you today?
I am well. Thank you very much for dropping by. I've been looking forward to this. Last time I saw you, I bumped into you at the McMinnville UFO Fest. You had a booth going there. And I said, I definitely have to get you on the show. And then life happened, and I ended up touring all over the place down into the southwest U.S., into Arizona and California. And now I'm trying to get back and get in 2020 underway. And I'm glad that you could drop by.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Ron,
it'll be fun.
In your, looking at your website now, and again, I'll get my listener to head over to the website, ronmorehead.com. You've been doing this a while. What got you interested in Bigfoot and that research that you've been doing? What is it that tweaked your curiosity?
Well, what tweaked me to start with was my friends were hunters, and they were up in the mountains, and they hadn't came back. One of them did. He was scared off the mountain where they hunt, and the guys were a day late coming back, and all the women were worried because they'd already heard about these Bigfoots that came in just before that. And anyway, he wouldn't go back by himself, so I walked up there with him, and that's what got me involved in the camp. That was 1971. I was 29 years old, and I thought I was in good shape, but that trip just about killed me. It's 8 miles, very imposing trail, what there is of a trail anyway. And so it was how I got involved. I got up there, and they were just packing up to leave, and that was, probably mid-afternoon, but it's a lot quicker getting out of that camp than it is going in. But they already had their packs and the mules and everything was loaded up, so we went back out. I rode out. Thankfully, one of the guys had a horse that he didn't mind walking, so that got me involved. Up till then, none of these guys were looking for Bigfoot. I certainly wasn't. That wasn't what the agenda was. It was a hunting camp. 8 miles into the wilderness, 8,400 feet the elevation there, and you get snowed out in the wintertime. This is in Sierra Nevada mountains of California. So I got involved. I got real excited about it because eventually it's just human nature. You want to find out what's going on. These things left huge tracks. I got to see some of the tracks on my first trip in, and it was just exciting. And when I started going back, I got involved with the group that way. And that winter, I bought me some guns and decided I'm going to start hunting these guys. This is like heaven up here. It's really a wilderness. It's you're way back away from nobody. In those days, there's no cell phones. There's no way of contacting anything. You're on your own back there. And it became real adventurous. These things would come around the camp at night, and basically we thought they were where they were. Kind of sound the harassment sounds is what you hear, the chest beating type, huge sounds. And we could tell they were communicating with each other, but we didn't know if they were talking about eating us or if they were talking about carrying us away, or if they were saying, are these guys okay or not? We all had guns. We were ready to shoot our way out of that little shelter we had if we had to, but they didn't crash in, which I'm sure they could have if they wanted to. And we didn't shoot. So we kind of got used to it a little bit and got a little bolder around them because we realized they weren't crashing in after us. And we started, trying to interact with them and trying to find out more about them. It was the winter of 71 into 72 when Warren Johnson, he's the leader of the group, they've been hunting up there since the 50s, him and his brother Lewis. And he wrote a 23-page handwritten letter to Ivan Sanderson, a cryptozoologist back east, who's passed away now. He thought it was probably a hoax because nobody has this stuff happen to them. And these things just have to be a primate out there. And he forwarded the letter to Peter Byrne, who was in Oregon at the time. He also thought it was a hoax. It just can't be. But he thought it might be something you got to check out. So he sent that down to a guy named Alan Berry, who was working in Redding, California. And he came down and interviewed us separately and together, and he heard some of the sounds that we had recorded. And he was wanting to go in. So we invited him in 1972. That summer he went in, and he set up his microphone, his little cassette tape recorder. That's what we were using back then, those portable cassettes. And he got some pretty clear sounds, and we was all recording, so we all got the same thing, pretty much. And but he was taking it really serious. He was trying to still find out who could be doing this, who could be tricking these guys like this, because he's an investigative reporter, had a master's degree in science. So he was really into trying to figure this out. We didn't know that. We thought he was on our side because we knew they were real. There was nobody messing with us up there in this remote area. And so anyway, he ended up recording some really clear sounds. And those sounds he ended up circulating around trying to find some university, somebody somewhere that would take the subject matter seriously. Because in the 70s, I'll tell you, you said Bigfoot or UFO, you'd get laughed out. But he was pretty much getting laughed out when you go to these colleges and stuff, because these professors and all just, they won't touch subject matter like that or they'll lose their credibility in the academia circle. So he finally ended up finding a Professor Curlin at the University of Wyoming who would look at this unbiasedly and give him an opinion, one way or the other. Are they real or are they not real? Could they have been pre-recorded or re-recorded? And Dr. Curlin spent a whole year on this, and he determined that they had not been pre-recorded, did not speed it up, they were not slowed down, they were not manipulated in any way. Al Berry had the original cassettes, and that was very important. And so you could tell if anything had been manipulated, and nothing had been. There was no 60-cycle hum in them. Anyway, we got that. That was a huge step towards what he was after, which was credibility. And it wasn't until 2008 until a cryptolinguist retired as a cryptolinguist from the Navy, who got a hold of them through accident through the BFRO website, and he heard those, and he wow, he thought he heard language in it. That's what he's been doing for 20 years in the military. So he teaches foreign languages even to this day in Missouri. His name is Scott Nelson. And he came all the way out from Missouri to interview Al Berry and myself to find out the context of some of these sounds that we were playing and that he was hearing. And he went back with a copy of the original and started listening to it and determined that these things have a complex language. As I said before, we knew they were conversing with each other, like Albert Ostman said in his event of Toba Inlet. He said they were chattering amongst themselves. Well, that's what these were doing. They were chattering amongst themselves. And anyway, he says they have a language by the human definition of language, which is critically important because only humans have the hyoid bone connected to the tongue, which goes to the nerves of the brain, which gives me and you our sapient conversation right now. We can talk to each other. No animal on the face of this planet is supposed to have that. But these things that we were dealing with has that. And then you find out they're out of the human range. You know, no human can make the range that they have. The below our frequency and above our frequency, our average human frequency is a certain area. And Dr. Curlin gave that report in an anthology of the, it was in BC in 1978 at British Columbia, Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And there was one of the first ever symposiums of this type. Man Like Monsters on Trial was the name of it. And anyway, he gave his report there, and it came out in a book that was subsequently published by the UBC Press. And his whole report is in that book, Man Like Monsters on Trial. But it shows the range of these beings that we were dealing with. And then you got the cryptolinguist who now says that, or he said all along, these things have a language. We just don't know what they're saying. But he did transcribe a language. He's totally vetted. He's two-time graduate of the Defense Institute of Foreign Languages. And we've had a lot of other people listen to him. They're experts in human sound and all that. But those are the two that I like to mention because they have made the biggest step for us in the credibility of these sounds. And it seems like that's what you have to have is people who have some kind of a PhD behind their name or some kind of a high education to say that's that, or they won't. Otherwise, it's just our story. And a lot of people have their story, and they're all interesting. But what makes ours interesting, I think, is the credibility and the science that we have behind the study of these sounds. And it shows that these things are out there. There's no doubt. We don't try to, and I don't try to, at any of these presentations I give, to convince people that Bigfoot's out there. They are. What I came to in my conclusions to it goes deeper, though, because there was a lot of mysteries associated with them up there. A lot of unidentified sounds we couldn't. I don't mean vocalizations. I mean just sounds that you couldn't place and lights that we couldn't understand, and just things would happen. And I always wondered what in the world could do that. We all wondered that. And so anyway, it drew me into my quantum theory, which I've got now in my second book, The Quantum Bigfoot. And it gets into the way the universe actually works. It seems like here we are stuck with Newtonian physics only. And if you can't see it, touch it, and use your five senses to understand it, it doesn't exist. Well, that's just not the way it is. It's just untrue. There's nothing wrong with Newtonian physics, but it only works for our three-dimensional environment. According to quantum physics, there's 11 different dimensions. We live in just 3 of them. We only see within light's frequency. I got into frequencies and vibration, and Nikola Tesla said, if you understand the universe, think of terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Well, that's so true. You get down to the most minute level of our existence, we are just energy. And it translates into the mass that we're showing right now in the form of our bodies. But Anyway, I'm rambling on, James.
No,
Just
you're
stop me
doing
and keep
fine.
me going.
One of the things I found when I listen to these Sierra sounds, it sounds to me like they're, and if you can imagine as a kid growing up and imagining what a Japanese samurai would speak like. It was just almost like a guttural, but you could, to the layman, if you know, if you ever watched old movies and stuff, when you hear it, it sounds like a language.
Mm-hmm.
It's presented. It comes in your brain, and you're trying to translate it yourself. Or is it broken English, or is it this? It was definitely not broken English, but closest I can say it. It really sounds like a very guttural Japanese of some sort. It's, and we're going to play Sierra sounds here in a few minutes for the listener, and let them make that decision too, because to me that's what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of.
It sounds like language.
Yeah, it is language, but it sounds like a lot of influence from Mongolia area possibly, because I heard the Mayan language one time, when the actual Mayan language down in Central America, when I was down there doing some research, and this guy who was a Mayan descendant, he kept the language alive, and he started talking to me, and it sounded really much a lot that Asian influence, just like I thought, wow, that sounds like things I've heard at our camp in the Sierras. And I found out from talking to him that the Mayan people actually migrated down from Mongolia. And they know that through DNA studies and the mark at the base of their spine when they're babies. And there's a lot just interesting how that all came together for me just in that moment down there listening to him talk, because it does have that fling to it, expression.
That's interesting. And in physics, I spoke to a guy named Steve Long. Now this Steve was a kid that just got through. So I think he dropped out in the 10th grade or something. But he was an electrician, and he was working in a place back in the eastern U.S. and was jumping from one. There was two buildings separated by a small space in the roof, and as he jumped from one to the other, he got struck. There was ball lightning kind of amplified in between the two buildings, and it knocked him out. And the guys he was with thought he died. Well, this kid who really didn't like reading came out of the hospital devouring anything he could read on physics, and swears up and down like the physics is wrong. The Newtonian physics is not. It's so elementary. Mm-hmm. And he tries to describe it to me as a layperson, and it's just way over my head. And this is a guy who didn't get past the 9th grade. Mm-hmm. Now he's, from getting zapped by lightning, he floors physicists when he's talking to them, and has interesting arguments with them. So yeah, I kind of wonder what switch got turned on in him by the universe that allows him to see things on a little bit different plane than we do, and that's what in your book Quantum Bigfoot and us being restricted in our perception by what we believe physics is now. Yeah, there's a good example of a guy who's not restricted and open to all sorts of possibilities of 11 dimensions and on. So
that's what I try to encourage with people: just keep an open mind, because there's more going on you don't see. We only see within our restricted visibility frequency, and that's what light allows us. And if you look at just what really is out there, you notice every once in a while a camera will pick up something that your eyes don't. That's because the camera's lens is able to pick up a little broader scope, spectrum than our eyes. And it's just amazing if you start researching. So many researchers, quote-unquote researchers, don't research. They just stick along with thinking these are some kind of ape out there in the woods, and there's nothing else going on, because they were trained when they were in the 5th grade that Newtonian physics is the rule that applies for everything. And nothing wrong with Newtonian physics, but there's more to it, just like there is more to Darwinism. Darwinism doesn't explain how we got our consciousness, how telepathy works, how intuitiveness works, how any of this really works that's inside of us, from the minute level all the way through the macro level. And that's why you have to just step out of the box of Newtonian physics only and realize there's more going on and start looking into it and see what could account for that. Like I say, Al Berry, the investigative reporter we let in there, he had a master's degree in science, and he said, whatever you do, don't talk about the screwy stuff going on up here. He says, just stay with science, and you'll get invited to talk. Well, for a while, him and I, after we got together and became friends, we started giving our lectures and talks at different places, and we always talked about just the sounds themselves and the study behind the sounds and da-da-da-da-da, and let people hear the sounds. We didn't talk about the strange goings on, but I do now. Al Berry passed away. He was a good friend of mine, and we hung out a lot together. In 2012, he went on. But anyway, I talk about the strange things now, and I started looking into the science of what could be the answer to it. And the answer, I think, is in the laws of quantum physics, which govern the universe. They govern everything about us from the minute level all the way on through the universe. And if you're going to dismiss that and not use that science in your research, I think you're hurting yourself, because you're not looking into it deep enough. These things have a mystery about them. Too many people see them disappear. Well, they go out of our light perception. That's all. They can change their energy frequency. And that sounds like that's something simple. We haven't learned just exactly how they change matter into mass and back and forth. Matter into energy and back. But they somehow can do that. I've had so many reports, and for a long time I just discarded those reports as being, these guys are Looney Tunes, And a lot of people call me Looney Tunes now because I talk about it. But the problem they got is I've encountered these things. So many researchers don't have a clue. They've never encountered them. They've never been around them. They don't know. They don't really understand what I'm talking about until something happens to them, and then they open their minds up a little bit. And I try to get all researchers to do that, because without using all the tools available, you're never going to understand what's really going on. And one of the tools is quantum physics, and it's not that hard to understand. You can get your head around it. You can't understand everything, because you'll never understand how far it is to the end of the universe, right? Because we think everything is measurable and predictable. That's Newtonian physics. Everything is material or physical. That's Newtonian physics. Well, that's just not true. It's just not true. It's not untrue in our three-dimensional environment, but if you really want to stretch out and look at everything, there's so much more going on.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And when you hear the stories of Bigfoot experiencers, or those who have had an encounter, some of those encounters that they're having are what you would almost call interdimensional. I think Jeremy Corbell, a buddy of mine, did a documentary on the Skinwalker Ranch. And somebody he interviewed claimed that they saw like a beam of light come down a big tube, and this thing crawl out of it, flop to the ground, stand up, and walk away. And what they described really was Bigfoot coming out of a beam of light and then walking away from it. And so where the heck did that come from? And is that the same Bigfoot that we see or has been seen, the big hairy thing eating berries in the field? Or is that something different and connected to that species or that being? So lots of questions, and bless your friend that did the research, a scientist, but he knows the answer now. And so, unfortunately, we can't call him. But I used to say that about Jim Mars after telling me about all the JFK conspiracies and stuff. When I heard that he passed, I actually had a little smile to myself, thinking, okay, you know the answer now.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
Once you step out of this, and according to Stephen Hawking, famous physicist who recently passed away, he said energy can't die. Well, that falls right in with Einstein and these other physicists from 100 years ago. Energy cannot die, and we all are at our most minute level of existence, energy. And that's just a fact. And you can deny that because you can't see it, but it's there. It's absolute fact. So if energy can't die, you just sort of pass on to another form. According to Einstein, you just change forms.
I like how you, at the beginning, at the top, you come out and said, well, Bigfoot exists. Okay, now move on. and these are my books, and this is my experience. I do the same thing with ghosts. When people say, like, you're paranormal. Well, I don't need to do that anymore. I know they exist. So let's talk about ghosts and why and why they exist. Well, it's energy.
That's it.
It's in different places, and some move on and some don't, and some go where they're supposed to when whatever the great plan is. Bigfoot, I think, is the same. It's just it is what it is, and it does exist. You've gone through enough. You've talked to enough people who've experienced them literally face to face or to hearing them and seeing them at the corner of their eye, to the point where I know Bigfoot exists. You've experienced them, and it's just moving on. Okay, let's go over the what ifs. Just go. Okay, it exists now. What is it?
Well, I think, in my little theory here, we're in the third dimensional environment, right? We're all supposed to be moving out of that and supposed to be ascending and getting better as we evolve. Well, we evolve through the fourth dimension, then into the fifth dimension, which is unseeable. The fourth dimension, I believe, is plasma. It is the dimension where it's a material like solid, gas, and liquids. It's the fourth element of that. And yet it depends on the heat of it. It will depend on how much of it you see in the fourth dimension, because we can see that's light. Fourth dimension is light, but how much of the plasma can we see? And if these things are changing from the third dimension when they die, I'm talking about a ghost now, and you might see the reflection of their spirit or their embodiment of some type in the fourth dimension of plasma, I call it, and they haven't advanced or accelerated into the fifth dimension yet. Bigfoot, once you get in the fifth dimension, time doesn't exist as we perceive it now. So I think what we're seeing with ghosts and all is the fourth dimension, and it again depends on the heat of the energy itself. It will depend on if you see it or not. But I've talked to a lot of people that see the predator, the predator effect. And I know some of these people very well, and for a long time I couldn't understand that, but I think I can at least get a theory on it, that maybe they're seeing in the fourth dimension, and they're seeing the plasma field surround these things with the heat, depending on the heat. And
that's interesting,
yeah. So that's why I think a lot of ghosts you see at night. I mean, because also the Earth's vibrational frequency is 7.83 hertz. And I believe most animals are like that. And our hertz, actually, when we get into our alpha, into the theta state of sleep, prior to that, we were in our about 8 hertz. Our bodies reduced down to that when we're not analytical. And I tell people, too, my suggestion is don't be analytical when you're out there. Don't try to set up traps and do all that stuff, because these things are ahead of you already. They seem to know what you're doing. At least they stayed a step ahead of us every time we try to check them, because people are, if you had that much experience, you would have had a picture by now. Well, no, it's not that easy to get a picture. Any researcher knows that. We are very fortunate enough that we were able to capture their sounds and get going with this part of it. So anyways, that's where I stand with Ghost.
We did a Bigfoot weekend, call it just an overnight, with a fellow named Thomas Seawood, who has a sea kayaking camp up on the east coast of Vancouver Island. And we set up night vision cameras, and I set up a camera where I didn't tell anybody else where it was, and they were all moved the next day. And we put some cherries up in a tree, and figuring they would come in and maybe take them, and nothing. But there were footprints. There were hundreds of footprints there the next day. And this is typical Pacific Northwest pine needle kind of ground, where me at 235 pounds, if I jumped up and down, my foot went in about a quarter inch, and over about an hour, that quarter inch kind of expanded out again like a big sponge. Well, these footprints were 2.5 to 3 inches in the ground. About 20. The one I cast out was 22 inches long. And they weren't there the day before, and if somebody was out stomping and hammering footprints into the ground all night long, we would have heard them, because we didn't sleep that well in these shacks, and they were only 30, 40 yards, not even that, 10 or 15 yards from where we were sleeping. And they're all over the place. But the cameras had moved. Even the one that I didn't tell anybody else on the team, I set up. And they were all just off an angle away. But the next time we're going to go, definitely going to have to multi-angle this thing with like 10 of them. So at least if one moves, we know who's moving it. But we didn't see.
I get one camera looking at the other one.
Yeah, exactly. But, hindsight. We're going to definitely go back.
Well, I was up there with Tom here in 2016 on an expedition that was put on by Todd Neese. Thomas Seawig got us grouped together. We went up into the archipelagos where he had his sighting. And that was pretty good. We spent a week on a boat, but we did just that. We tried to get one camera looking at the other one. Then nothing would happen because they've got you figured out. Of course, none of these guys are into what I'm into. I'm into the quantum aspects of these things. I attribute to many of these beings that are out there. Thomas and Todd and these other guys were strictly ape. There got to be an ape running around out there.
Critter, yeah.
And if you start talking about anything woo, they look like you're something less. And they don't do that to me, but I mean, I know I know them. Love them. They're good people, but they don't get out of their box. And if they don't start thinking a little bit bigger, they're never going to learn anything bigger. Thomas, I think, had a real sighting up there, a couple of them. And he took us to that island, and we spent, like I say, a week on a boat. And I mean, we literally lived on the boat. Even at nighttime, we set up thermal cameras and looking to see if we could spot anything messing with the cameras. And then also had cameras looking at each other. Different islands because we got there at low tide. And when were you back there, James?
2017.
Yeah, okay. You were there the year after.
Yeah.
And it was exciting, very, very beautiful area and a very hot area because these things have been seen, as you know, swimming from island to island up there.
Yeah.
And so, no doubt, I think it's Bigfoot country. There's been a lot goes on up there. In fact, that's Toba Inlet's just not too far from there. And that's where Albert Osman was supposed to be kidnapped. And I researched that area one time years ago, too, with Peter Byrne and a couple of guys. And that's just hot country, for Bigfoot.
Toba Inlet, the place that Thomas had his little sea kayaking place?
No,
okay.
I don't think so. Well, Toba Inlet's kind of out of the way. I mean, there's nothing there now. It was just a place where Albert Osman got rowed into to do some mining, and supposedly he was there for a few days. Something was messing with him at night. He heard it, but he thought it was a raccoon or something. He didn't know, but so he put his snuff cans in his sleeping bag and a couple of other things, and he all of a sudden during the night he got picked up and carried away for about 3 hours and ended up in this about a 10-acre bowl, he said, captive by this Bigfoot. And a female Bigfoot was there too, and 2 adolescents. And I don't know how much you know about the story, but it's a very compelling story. It's in John Green's book, The Apes Among Us. He interviewed him in the 50s. This happened to Albert Osman in 1924. So he got interviewed 30 years later, and it's interesting how the story comes. But we researched it pretty thoroughly. We had a helicopter on standby over Camel River to get dropped into the bowl. How do we have found it? I'm a pilot. I had the plane I was flying. We were slow flying for 7 hours that day over this whole area trying to find something that resembled what Albert Osman said he was kept in. Couldn't find it. And we came to the conclusion, we studied it a lot, that he probably wasn't at Toba Inlet. He was in a different inlet. It made more sense to us. And I actually dropped down to 1,000 feet in my airplane just to see if I could see what he said he saw at 1,000 feet when he was camping, and you couldn't see what he said he saw. So I think he was in a different spot. We all agreed to that. I talked to John Green about it a little later on after we'd gone up there, and I said, do you think he could have been mistaken? No, he was in Toba Inlet. He wouldn't give it the time of day to even consider that he might have been somewhere else. But anyway, that's our conclusion, and Peter and I have talked about it a lot. And so, speaking of Peter, he's one of the only ones left. He's 95 and still out there.
Jeez, yeah. When you go back to 1922, it wasn't like he was part of a fad back then, like in the late 70s when everybody was out shaking trees and, faking Bigfoot sightings and things like that in the mid-'70s. 1922, that would have been something you probably didn't want to share with people.
Well, he turned it in to the courts, to the deputy, did a deposition or whatever it takes there to swear it. And he said he was there for 6 days, so he got to study them quite a bit. That's where you get your information, is from these people that have had an encounter. If you want to believe their encounter, like people should believe me because it happened. I'm just saying that, but we've got evidence that back in those days, you're right, people talked about the monkey man and all that stuff in the mountains, but they didn't have encounters like Osman had. And that was 1924. Actually, the same year that Fred Beck had his incident there at Ape Canyon in Mount St. Helens, where he claims he shot one dead on and it fell and they couldn't find the body. So you get mystery after mystery with these things, and first thing you know, you got to work on trying to figure those things out.
The incident down at Mount St. Helen, I read a little bit about that. Was that the one where they were throwing rocks at the roof of the cabin?
Yes.
Yeah, and the guys, he thought he was fearing for his life. It wasn't like he was, I'm going to go shoot one of these things. It was like they were, throwing big rocks down onto the roof of the cabin, which could have, killed somebody or actually knocked a hole in the roof of the cabin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he actually, they've been encountering them for a couple of years there. In fact, Fred Beck was, to his dying day, he said there's something paranormal about these things. They're not like we are. It's because they were following the tracks in the snow one time, is the report I got, and the tracks stopped. You hear this a lot, and people will just discard the whole account because the track stopped. Well, if you change mass into energy, we're getting into physics again. You change mass into energy, it has no weight to it. These things weigh a lot. I followed a trackway, and it just stopped up there in the mountains of the Sierras. And these things, like you say, were a couple inches deep. We couldn't even make a print in that dirt. Ground, I should say. It was hard. But it was right after my daughter had a sighting, and we found the trackway, and the trackway just abruptly stopped. I looked in the trees. I looked for boulders I could have jumped to. I looked for wherever it could have went, and it was just a mystery. I got a picture of that in my book, too. Scott Nelson was there. Him and I were having a little venture with the horses and all. So anyway,
that whole cross, like the interdimensional being, and I know I touched on this really briefly with you earlier off air, but we had an opportunity to talk to a psychic who had literally an ET come through, like most of the psychics around the world did back in 2014 to 2015. And I said, well, does Bigfoot exist? And the word came back, yeah, he exists. And we talked about a being called an Echo, E-K-K-O is what he said, how it was spelled. And it was a ET here to protect the animal that was the Bigfoot, which then kind of made sense when I hear about things like the tracks disappearing, or in one of the conversations I had before with the psychic was, the head peeking around the corner of a tree and then ducking back in, and when you come up, it's gone. How the heck does it do that? And it kind of deals with the interdimensional, and maybe explained a little bit of why some of them appear to be an animal that is actually feeding, or an animal that is doing all those things an animal would do in the wilderness that we have that exists now, or in this dimension, in this plane, drinking water at a creek, eating berries in a field, like an animal, or a being, a sentient being. And then it also explained why the woo-woo side of things kind of happen when it disappears around a corner and you'll never see it again, or the footprints just, the footprints have taken you away and into a different direction, and when you're far enough away, they stop. Meanwhile, the real ones, or the quote-unquote real ones, are booking it out the other way. But who knows?
Who knows? Exactly. Yeah. None of us really know. I hear these people say about experts, and I've been called an expert. I don't feel like I'm an expert. I just know I've been studying for 50 years, so since we encountered them, and we're still encountering things. I was up there in 2018 with David Paulides doing a filming, and that's on that the hunted, missing 411, I think it is. And he's got about 15-minute section in there on the Sierra Camp and the trip in and that. And anyway, we talked about the enigmas associated with that camp. And 2 years before, in 2016, is when my wife and I were up there, and we were in this little tent. And wasn't asleep yet, so I seen this rod of light going by. Now that's weird. And he does a really good reproduction of what I told him. His cameraman did, and they reproduced this light going through the trees. It's a bolt, or a bolt. It was a rod of light. I tell people it's like a Star Wars saber, one of those things you swing around. And but it was glowing, going right between the trees. And there's no explanation for that other than it was an unidentified flying object. Slow. We watched it for several seconds till it went out of sight. But you don't know. When those things happen, nothing surprises me up there. Actually, nothing surprises me anywhere anymore. There's so much going on we don't see. You just try to understand it, and that's it. Because you may never solve the mystery of Bigfoot, but you can understand it a little bit, I think. And that's what I try to do. So. Experts supposed to know everything about everything, everything about a certain subject, I should say, and nobody knows everything about these things. What I do subscribe to, what I do really come out with now, I think there's different types of them, different ones. And I don't mean just like a Mexican to a black man, or to a white man, or to a Canadian, or to a Afghan, or whoever. I don't mean that type. We're all still humans. I'm talking about different genomes. And I'm thinking because eons and eons have passed, and I think aliens have infiltrated this earth for eons and for thousands of years, and different ones have manipulated the DNA of different animals, and including primates, including humans. There's a whole abduction program, I think, going on too, with people who claim they've been kidnapped, and then they come back and they've got an implant in them. And Dr. Lear down in Southern California, who just passed away too, by the way. Mm-hmm. These people are dying.
Why are we laughing? Yeah, but they're more of a...
Well, it's just, you never die. You just never die. You pass on. Yeah. I've got to say that. Because there's even the Bible says there's "Oh death, where is thy sting?" or something like that. Because once you get out of this body, you'll know everything. That's the good news. You will understand everything then. But yeah, I was going to say something about Native Americans a while ago. They say they're spirit beings who can disappear. Wow, that's kind of interesting. Now I have a different theory. Of course, you heard from a medium, I guess, on this echo type thing. But I was thinking, I've had several reports of these things. If they can transfer their mass into energy only through a frequency, they could go into a tree. And you hear a lot of reports of them being around electrical devices. You hear a lot of reports, our reports, batteries would go dead on us up there. Scott Nelson can attest to that. The cryptolinguist, he'd go up there with a whole week's supply of batteries and they'd go dead on him. My brand new lithium batteries, I just put in my tape recorder in 2011. I had one of these things out there making some sounds. I thought I could turn it on. Well, I had it on earlier, checking the battery, put the battery in and all that, and it was perfect. It was dead at 10 o'clock that night when I started hearing this chattering going on. So I couldn't record anything. And how does that...
What was the temperature like?
Oh, it wasn't that cold. I was in summertime. I was there by myself, which is a no-no. I wasn't planning on going up there by myself, but I was nothing happened when Scott and I was up there all that summer. We was up there 3 different times, go in for a week, come out, resupply, take a shower, go back up, And he was here all summer trying to capture some more corroborating sounds. He could have the experience himself, and it just wasn't happening. So I thought after he left to go back to his teaching job in Missouri, I just got to get up there again. The weather's good. I had this guy scheduled to go up there with me, and he backed out. It's not an easy trip, and we were walking in. So you got to be in shape to do that trip, and you got to be altitude-wise too, because you're up at a high altitude. You get up to 10,000 feet before you start dropping down into our camp area. It's 8,400 feet. But just the trip alone, I mean, to take horses in is a lot easier, but it's also more dangerous if you don't have a real trail-wise horse. And I mean a high mountain horse. You need one that knows what they're doing. I've had a few broken ribs off that trail. There were times from a horse going off the edge or something, and it can be taxing, really.
So much for me taking my helicopter up there and
well, actually,
bouncing over 10,000 feet in it.
Actually, Peter, you got a helicopter?
No, but honestly, the shape I'm in, it would go out of my way to rent one.
Well, Peter and I went up there in a helicopter one time. We got dropped off a couple miles from camp. It's the only place he could stop, and he didn't even want to stop. He didn't stop. He just got down low and said, "Jump out." And, that's what we had to do, and walked into camp. But Peter, it's such a trip. Peter was already getting older, and as we're all getting older, I guess. But he just didn't want to walk that trip in, which he had done years and years before with Al Berry, the reporter we took in. Anyway, we did take a helicopter ride in there once. That made it a lot easier, I'll tell you what. But then we had to come out. But it's all downhill, and sometimes that's not so easy either. You got this pack on your back, and there goes your knees trying to make it through these rocks.
Oh, geez, I blew my knee out going into Tom Seawood's camp, and I had a 90-pound pack.
Oh, gosh.
And I stepped down, and gravity wasn't my friend. I just put a little bit too much pressure on the inside of my knee, and the whole thing, I just went over.
Oh, no.
And everyone laughed until they had to lift me up and realize my knee was 3 times bigger than it was supposed to be.
That hurts.
But yeah, it was an adventure. But it was good. We were talking to Ron Morehead. Please go to his website, ronmorehead.com. Check out the About section. Look at the books and audio and see what else he's been up to, and also on his blog. If you want to follow him on Facebook, if you are connected to that, Ronald J. Morehead on Facebook. And it'll also show a lot of the events that he's coming up. I think in March you are in Georgia.
Correct.
At the Cherry Log Museum. Is that correct?
Yes.
You're speaking there, April 4th and 5th, Enumclaw, Washington. You've got a conference. Yeah, just keep an eye on him. See the different conferences he's coming to. Busy in April out in Michigan at a Bigfoot conference. April 17, 18. You're speaking on the 18th. And bouncing around. A lot in Washington State. I think I'm going to come down to one of the ones in Washington there and harass you.
Well, you should come down to the one on May 2nd. I got one going over here at the Kingston, Washington, just across from Seattle, and it's at the Point Casino Lodge. And I'm introducing now in my program, because I do talk to MUFON groups, because I believe in the alien connection now with these entities, and I kind of put the dots together in a hopefully coherent way so people can understand where I'm coming from with this. And that's on May 2nd at the Point Casino. And you ought to trip on down here and see that one. That's gonna be full, I think. I
would, but I've got a table in Virginia City.
Oh, really? Good for you.
At a Paracon there. A ghost thing in Virginia City, Nevada.
Cool.
And then the next weekend I'm in Tombstone, Arizona, and then possibly Contact in the Desert, but I haven't confirmed that yet. But I'd love to. If I end up not going to Nevada, then definitely I'll be coming down. I'd rather drive the 3.5 hour or 3 hours down to your event in Washington State than the 14-hour drive to Nevada. And at least I could probably come home in the same day if I go see yours. Good. And again, if people, you want to check to see what Ronald's doing, Ronald J. Morehead on Facebook and ronmorehead.com.
By the way, that last name is spelled with one O, Morehead. Everybody wants to put 2 O's in there.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I'll say Morehead, but it's actually Morehead.
Yeah.
Like Morehead. It's fascinating. You've led a very, very interesting life, and it's not over yet, young man. So quit saying you're old. Did
I say that?
Yeah. I know. You keep inferring, I'm too old to be climbing that. Yeah, maybe you're, this whole Sierra camp could be a little bit closer and a little bit easier to access, but at least you've been there. So
I flew over it after the fires in 2018. There's a lot of fires in California. I think 17 forest fires going on.
Jeez, yeah.
The whole area where we were caught on fire. So we got out just a week or two before it all was encapsulated with fires. It did fly over to in a little plane afterwards, and it looked like there were several acres right where our camp is where the big trees hadn't burnt down. So, like Joe Hauser, my friend at Montana Vortex, he said sometimes, he's a wildlife biologist, sometimes the fire would just underburn, and it looks like that may have happened up there because there's still some trees. So, kind of interesting to hear somebody go up there and give a report on it.
There was some. I don't know if you heard about this. It was just thinking about the fires and disasters and things. I was thinking back to a conversation I overheard at the International Bigfoot Conference down in Kennewick, Washington, a couple of years ago. And there was some fellas talking about the Mount St. Helens eruption and a logging crew that came in to start clearing basically a creek that had turned into a raging river because of all the logs jammed up against it. And these guys would come in and clear out all the logs, and they were finding bits and pieces of animal, and one of the pieces of animal they thought was a bear actually was a long arm with a hand on it. Did you hear anything about that?
I've heard a lot of stories about that. That's not that specific, but just they've carried bodies off of it, and you don't know what's being made up and what's real unless you. Government, I think, hides a lot of stuff because they don't want us to know about this.
And that's what I was going to get into, because this fellow was managing a little local tavern/restaurant not too far from the location. So these workers would come in there for a beer after work and tell them about all the bits and pieces of bodies they were finding, and swore up and down it was Bigfoot. And then the Air Force showed up and took custody of the body parts, put a guard on them, and eventually, when they thought they got everything they needed to get, they wrapped them all up and took them out of town. And one of the fellas, this is your over a beer story, but he said that the vehicle showed up one day and it had a Bigfoot type animal in it, actually talking to somebody in the Air Force, and they were driving up to check on some quote unquote Bigfoot that lived in the area. They were double checking to see if they were okay or not. So that was kind of interesting. If that was all true, then yeah, the government was in there trying to make sure no bits and pieces went anywhere. And again, is the Bigfoot the guy in the Air Force was talking to was an ET,
right?
And communicating that way and checking on the other ones and trying to help them out. So. Yeah, it was.
Well, I have hardly any doubt. I'm 99% sure the government knows about these things, and it could be because of what I'm suggesting, that they have an alien component to them. And I think there's a hybridization program going on with different types of aliens to enjoy this Earth, which I think is the cream of the crop of the solar system, and it's got everything any species needs just about, except an alien may not be able to survive in it if they're used to a different planet. So they're trying to probably acclimate their species into this environment, and it could be because we're fixing to kill ourselves with all our destruction and stuff that's going on. And they need somebody needs to survive this, and it'll probably be Bigfoot if anybody does. They know how.
And that's kind of what we, Joanna Banka, the psychic, and I were talking about, was the reason the ET, the Echo, was here protecting the animal, was that animal is actually our base DNA, and if anything happened to the rest of the humans here, aliens would come back and repopulate, mixing with that base DNA again, like they did. My DNA on my father's side was traced back years ago when DNA was a little different than it is now on Ancestry.com, when it actually showed you 30,000, 40,000 years ago. Some people's DNA goes back 70,000 years. Mine went 30,000 years, originating somewhere around where the Suez Canal is now, and then went up over top of Europe and around, and on a 30,000-year walk to the northern part of England, and then on a boat to Canada, on my dad's side. But 30,000 years wasn't that long ago. So where was it before that? Does DNA just appear, or
good question?
Something, or is it a product of two different DNAs. So, or two.
What I find interesting about what
non-Earth
you're saying is the nuclear DNA, which is the male counterpart, is really difficult to extract. Most of the history they do on you is through the mitochondrial DNA, which is the maternal side.
Yeah.
It takes the female over because that's who produces life, really, for this, for us. And so it should take you back, and I don't, there had to have been a pretty thorough DNA to get the nuclear DNA part of it, and it's a very expensive thing to do.
Yeah,
that's where like these geneticists, there's two different geneticists, Melba Ketchum being one, and a lot of people have heard that name, and then another Balmain who is out of France. She's a geneticist who came up with pretty much identical to what Melba Ketchum came up with, and that's the mitochondrial DNA. The maternal side is mostly human. It's the nuclear DNA, which they have a problem with. They can't seem to locate it in the gene bank. And that's the same thing that supposedly National Geographic sponsored the whole deal up into the Himalayas at 17,000 feet. And they extracted eDNA, which is environmental DNA, out of a track up there that looked like it was probably a Yeti track. It was a five-toed print walking in the snowy ice. And they was able to extract some DNA from that. And 2 years later, she gave a report. I seen the report prior to it being made public because I know the people in Bhutan a little bit and got privy to it. And she's the one. She said in that it was the mitochondrial DNA was 99% human. It's the nuclear DNA, the male counterpart, that's the puzzle because they don't have it. They can't compare it to anything. That's just about what Melba Ketchum came up with. However, in her official report, I couldn't read anything about that because she would have been probably booed out of the academia society if she'd said that. It's like Melba Ketchum got booed out of hers, It's just wrong because these people won't consider anything. It's out of their paradigm. Their paradigm seems to think that these things have to be an ape out there somewhere. Yeah, a very smart ape, but an ape. And, I got to think that some of them might be rather hominid, just evolved right up through the chain, just like a troglodyte. But somewhere along the line, there's been some changes because of who the nuclear DNA represents, which would be the male counterpart. And that could be different types of aliens. That's why you see the dogman, you hear about the dogman, you hear about different types of beings being able to do different things. And I've experienced some of that, and I've heard a lot of people that have experienced other things too. And it all falls into quantum physics, I believe, and into interdimensional and into alien intervention into the genome of different beings on this earth. And I think it's to acclimate their species to this climate because they see us, if we don't change our ways, we're going to blow ourselves up here one of these days.
Yeah, pretty much. When you say you've experienced some of those things, the other cryptids, what kind of things have you bumped into?
Oh, well, let me just get my list out here. I got my little presentation here. Well, just some of the enigmas I mentioned in my program. We've seen, one time in the daytime you hear the sound of a stampede of horses coming to our camp, and that's just not what's happening. You don't see them. A lot of times you hear sounds, but you can't find the source of it. At one time I heard a tuning fork, sound like a big tuning fork, huge tuning fork, daytime. I'm trying to find where it came from.
That was in your camp?
Yeah, at our camp. Jeez. Had these lights up there sometimes that would follow us around, and you got just things.
I got to ask you that I haven't read anything to do with you seeing lights or anything like that, but could you describe these lights as being about volleyball to basketball in round and in either blues or reds? Yeah,
orbs. They were white, and they followed the Johnson brothers around up there, all three of them, one night, a couple nights before Bill and I got there. Bill and I saw, when we were up there by ourselves, this huge ball coming down from the sky, controlled. It was coming down slowly, but it just came right down. It was huge. It was blue, and we lost it behind the trees, but it was all associated with this Bigfoot phenomenon that we were experiencing at the same time, too. There's another time we heard this Geiger counter type sound, like a clicking sound, and more like castanets I describe in my book, The Voices in the Wilderness. It's a clicking sound, and it was out by our stove, and it started working its way up to our shelter where we were sleeping. And we had the door closed on the shelter. I say door, it's a log that we put in just between two other big trees and bind it closed so no boogers will get us. And all of a sudden, a clicking noise was inside the shelter. As soon as you turn your light on, it stops. Then turn your light off, it'd start up again. So we never did find the source of that. But Bill and I talked to him sometime after that, years later actually. I said, Bill, you ever had anything happen to you outside of the camp than down here? Because what happened to me, I was out irrigating in my field, and I heard this clicking sound again, same clicking sound. And I looked around, I couldn't see anything making it. I got something on my boot, what's going on here? No, I could not find the source of it. And Bill told me when I was having lunch with him, he said, yeah, you remember that clicking sound we had up there? I had that happen to me down here. So who knows what that is? It's just another little mystery, that's out there.
It's a grasshopper.
But these things are intelligent. They got something that we're underestimating. If you're not careful, you'll underestimate them completely, like we did in the 70s, where you just underestimate what we're dealing with. You set up a camera trap, they go around it. You think you got them figured out, and they got you figured out. At least the ones I dealt with are different than what I hear a lot of people are reporting, but then some people report the exact same thing what we had. So I just think there's different types.
Crazy. I'm going to play the Sierra sounds now, the actual vocalizations that was captured, and let my listener hear those. This first one is called Talk to Us. And I'll play each clip twice. I'll pause it and then go back to back, so it's twice. Again, this first one is called Talk to Us.
Which one talk to us?
And again.
Which one talk to us?
This next two, or it's the same one again back to back, it's called the anguish sequence. And again. Ron's next recording here, he's titled Appella Question.
Right there, just seen movement right through there. Right there, just seen movement right through there.
And here's the one that I really remember from a while, or one of the first interviews I've had with Ron. It's the one that basically sounds like samurais. In fact, it's actually called Samurai, and it's a looped one. So I'll just play it once for you.
Right there, just seen movement right through there.
And you can see how it kind of reminds you of like an old samurai movie or something Japanese-ish. And definitely a language. Well, you know, as much as I can tell, being a human being listening to that type of vocalization, it sure sounds like a language, doesn't it? This next one I'll play twice. It is called a whistle interaction.
Don't be like that. Come on. You're not very sociable tonight. Now, come on down. Okay, I'll go back in. Don't be like that. Come on. You're not very sociable tonight. Now, come on down. Okay, I'll go back in.
These are absolutely fascinating. I love them. Now, this last one, if your ears haven't blown up yet or been strained, this one might do it. It's called Rapid Fire Sequence. And one more time. Okay, Ron, those are fantastic.
Might offer too that we all were recording all the time, so we literally got hours of these different types of sounds. But okay. I've produced Alberry sounds, the very clear ones, on a CD generated by Jonathan Frakes. That's on my website too, ronmorehead.com. And I produced another one with the interactive sounds that I had 2 years later, same camp, 1974, actually 3 years later. And that's when I was out. We were outside the shelter, and I was. They were messing around with us, and the whole bit about this in my book. But it's a long story, so I won't get into it. But I was interacting with them, yelling back at them, and they were yelling at me, and quite exciting evening. That's the night I got to see one, and it's been a long time coming because they're very stealthy.
What did it look like?
Well, I didn't see it straight on face. I seen it going to the samurai cry is what it's been coined as. And he was coming from behind me down to where there was two other ones, a little one and a big one. And Bill had seen those down there behind the rocks down by the creek. And I seen this thing streaking down towards them. And I think the little one, from the sounds we recorded, was getting bold. And I think the adults were trying to keep him back or something. That's just the sense I get. I don't know that. But you hear him do a little squeaky cut noises, and him go coming down on it sound. Then here comes this big one coming down that way, like, keep Junior in line, Mom.
Yeah, don't talk to the humans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shut that kid up. He'll end up saying something in English, and he'll throw us all. Then they're all going to know who we are.
Well, they can speak in our frequency. They can speak above it, infrasound and ultrasound above it, and below it, infrasound. I think that's probably what happened to Warren Johnson and I one time. We're not sure what caused the effect, but something froze us when we was walking up evening time when one of these things was mouthing off around one of these trees, and we started walking up towards it. We thought we were going to see it run away because we were getting pretty bold then, and it didn't run away. But all of a sudden we got a little closer to that tree, and him and I, without talking to each other, both just got frozen in our tracks. And how do you explain? We couldn't explain it. He said, I don't know about you. I can't even move anymore. And he said, I can't either. I can go backwards, but I can't go forward. And that's what was happening. I brought this up to Leroy Fish, who was a wildlife biologist who passed away now. He's a BFR curator at the time. And he said, I don't want to hear about your fears. And I said, it wasn't fear. We weren't afraid of it at that time. We were really wanting to see one of these things and know more about them. And all of a sudden we were just froze. And he suggested infrasound, because that's what large animals can do, to freeze their prey or to communicate over long distances. Elephants would do that, and tigers would do it, large tigers, giraffes do it. So why not Bigfoot? If they have this frequency range, which they do have, we've established that through Curlin's report, the range they have is so superior to what we can do. I've been told they must have more than 2 vocal cords, and if that's the case, that would give an account for these different sounds we were hearing. One time I thought I heard a car door slam outside the shelter. Now, come on, we're 8 miles into the wilderness. That's not happening. But something made us hear that happening. So, what's doing that? They got a ability about their vocal mechanism to make just about any sound they want to make, which gives them a really good up on hunting. They can.
Oh yeah.
I've heard them call coyotes, and you hear coyotes, a bunch of coyotes answering. And anyway, that's probably how they hunt too.
Or, they could also use that as, oh crap, he heard me in the bush here. I think I'll make a sound like a rabbit or a coyote or a bear.
Yeah, what gives them away, James, is their amplitude. Their sound is so huge.
So loud.
Yeah. It's not like a bird chirping. It's like a 400-pound bird chirping, One time I thought we was listening to an owl up the ridge a little ways, and my daughter and I were just there by ourselves, and I thought I'll turn my tape recorder on. I turned it on, but the speaker thing was on and it made a squealing noise. Well, the owl sound we thought was an owl turned into Bigfoot chatter. So it was making an owl sound for what reason, I don't know. They toy with you. I got to say that too. I think they were toying with us a lot up there, but we were there seriously trying to figure it out, and at least Al Berry was. We was having fun with it, the other guys and I, and we were hunting too. So, and I'm talking too much probably, but...
Wait, you mean during an interview? No, you're doing fine.
Keeps you from having to ask me questions. Huh?
I don't know. I'm interested in what you have to say. When I was up at Thomas Seawood's place, we heard the whoop. Mm-hmm. They hear the whoop at you, and we're thinking, okay, maybe it was just an owl. But we're, the 6 or 7 of us, we're all in the one place, and we heard this off in the weeds. And this is another place. It's not as bad as yours, but we drove 2 hours north of a town, a very small town, on a logging road past 2 wonderful elk herds, and then had to hike in half an hour, 45 minutes down to the coast. And it wasn't like, okay, we're going to sneak into their camp and make Bigfoot sounds just to screw with them. Yeah, nobody was down there other than us. And the ocean's on one side, and we heard this whoop, and people said, well, could have been an owl. Well, yeah, and it could have been an owl if it had lips, because the whoop ends with a puh. Mm-hmm. And there's no animals out there that are going to make a whoop sound and then end it with a puh, like a puh, like the lips coming together. So that was fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. It makes me, and that's the other thing too. I was talking to the guy who did the documentary Bigfoot Girl there, and we want to go back, but not just an overnight thing. We want to spend a minimum of like 3 nights there, and come in extremely well prepared with audio and multiple digital cameras and full spectrum cameras and the whole bit to come in and try to cover this thing off a lot better than we did the first time. But that
good luck with that.
Fascinating.
Yeah, they can make those sounds like whatever they want, but it's like I say, it's the amplitude. It's how loud it is more than it is the sound itself.
Yeah.
The whoops I have recorded. I've got those on my second CD. The different types of whoops have different intonations, and I think it's their way of singling another one without actually saying something. They can whoop certain ways at certain times, and single to another one about your presence or what they're going to do. I think they have a code figured out.
Have you got these sounds in, I think it's Voices in the Wilderness, which is your book where hold on, you have an audio book, I think.
Well, I've got to do an audio book. No, what I have is the Voices in the Wilderness comes with a download of the sounds. So when I get to the context of the sounds, you can hear the sound. I used to send out a CD with it. I don't do that any longer because I have it fulfilled now by a fulfillment company, and they won't pack a CD in it, so I have to just provide the download in it. But I've reduced the price too, so it's better. I've sold a lot of those still, and my quantum book is really going over good because it answers so many questions for so many people, and unfortunately, so many people who are stuck in a paradigm won't get past the first chapter because there's no, he can't be right. But if they just, again, open their minds.
And you got to come into this open-minded. It's anytime, ever since in 2012, when I started snooping around the whole paranormal field and working on a paranormal team, getting your head over what you perceive is reality is the hard part. But once you've done that, things not only open up, but you start seeing and hearing a lot more. Mm-hmm. It's almost like we put a mental block in walking into these things. It can't happen.
Your brain has a way of filling in holes and filling in spots. It's called confabulation. And you can only fill it with things that you know about in your brain. And until you get new information in there, you won't ever fill it with anything else until you get get the information. So it's called confabulation. So a lot of times you'll see something and your brain will confabulate what it has to be. And that's just the way our brain works. So you're onto it there. Just, Thomas will, the man's full of history, as you know.
He's full of lots. You got to pick the history out.
He's okay. He's looking for an ape in the woods, and unfortunately, I think he's got to step up a little bit. Just think a little bit more. Could it be something more? Because they haven't found one. There's been no bones. There's been no body. There's really no hard evidence that this Newtonian physics has to have to establish their existence to science. And I don't know that science will ever get that answer if these things are what I'm suggesting, which is hybrid and alien, able to be interdimensional.
Yeah. And then my idea is like they could be critter and they could be protected by aliens who also clean up after them.
Mm-hmm.
But
could be.
Who knows? And again,
well, I think there's a good merit to what you just said. Yeah,
it's fascinating, and I really appreciate all the work 45 plus years you've put into this. It's beyond just an interest to you. It's like most of us poking around this. Every time you get what you think is an answer, it leads to 100 more questions.
Yeah, I've been at it a while. I'm one of the old timers, but it's been a lot of fun. That's what I do now. That's all I do. I retired from business several years ago, and so I've been around. I've been in South America a couple of times into short expeditions. I've been into Nepal, Russia, Siberia, just searching for answers to what all these things that are reported worldwide may have in common. And the elongated skulls down in Peru is what I was studying down there with these scientists, and seeing if they had any connection to the sagittal crest that's so often reported on Bigfoot up here. And it seems like they do. The Incas had stories of warring with the Maya and the Aztec in Central America. Then you got them telling stories about warring with giants in the north, which puts it into up here. And then you got the Lovelock Caves where the Paiutes supposedly warred with 8-foot red-haired giants that were cannibalistic. And you've got minaret skull. You've got so many things that people just need to start studying. That's what I've done, and that's what I suggest anybody do, and it'll just open your mind up a little bit.
And if anyone wants to get a hold of your book, just go to your website, ronmorehead.com.
Yes.
And click on books and audio down to all products, and it'll show you the books, The Quantum Bigfoot, Voices in the Wilderness, one in color and one in black and white. Mm-hmm. Get the color for the one in black and white. Those are colorable.
Yeah, I send out the color ones from my home here because most people buy the cheaper one because it's the only one on Amazon. There's the less expensive one because I don't put a CD in it, but you do get to download sounds on both of them. So anyway, it's been quite a relief for me to get someone to fulfill those for me instead of me having to package them up every day.
Yeah. Even though for every dollar Amazon charges, you get 10 cents or something.
Oh, it's terrible. But at least my whole idea of this thing is I've been pretty well off most of my life as far as being able to travel and do different things. So it's not the money that I've ever been after with this, even though now I feel like, I need to get something back from it, from my work that I've put into this, because I spent a fortune chasing this mountain gorilla, or what you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And so I do make a little bit on the books, even though Amazon sells them for me and packages and sends them out. But it's the information out, and that's what I want. Because if you don't do anything else with your life, you want it to count for something and mean something. And we're not going to live forever, but I'm getting older. I'm 77 now, and still enjoying life. But it's...
Heck, you just got married, didn't you?
Oh, I've been with this lady for 6 years now. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not like
got her at 71. What the heck? No problem. Yeah, you're in the good life right now. I'm going to make sure that everyone gets a link to your website when I post the show, and I really got to thank you for taking the time today and dropping by and saying hello.
Well, thanks for asking me. I appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you, Ron. Ron Morehead, please go to his website, ronmorehead.com, or bounce over to Facebook. If you have Facebook, Ronald J. Morehead. That's Morehead. Thanks again, Ron.
Thank you, Jim.
And hey! Let's be careful out there.